Story begins with a girl who was in the forest, and then she looked around and asked if someone was there. Then she saw a baby dragon and thought that, why is it in a place like this? Dragons are creatures that live on Draenaz, a big island country where humans live. It was because the race living there, Draconians, don't want to involve themselves with humans. They live and die together with the dragons, and they even fly into battle mounted on dragons. These prideful people only give their fealty and respect to one person, the Emperor of Draenaz. Then that little creature came there and hugged her, and she said that it was Rachi, and he was heavy. She saw a collar on her neck, and she wonders if she can remove it somehow if only she had the key. Since the day she found and named Red, she has hidden and sheltered him. But Red was probably a dragon from Draenaz. He was definitely taken by poachers. They separated him from his parents and brought him to this faraway country of Jaziria. Even after she found him, he was still being restricted. And then she thought that, what should she do? Then she asked that what he wants to do, if he wants to return to his old home, and then she realized that one day she will have to return Red to Draenaz. But for now, she will continue to protect him just for a little while, longer, and then she asked if that was right. Then she asked if he have seen a ring. It was her mother's precious ring, but it looks like she dropped it somewhere. Then the Red spoke something like squeak, and then she said that if it was not there, then where could it be? And then she wonders if she will find it, and then someone came there, and someone said to her to take Red with her, and she agreed. She was very ordinarily child right now. She was working as a maid-servant in the feudal lord's mansion. She has never met her father. Her mother was different from her. She was beautiful and kind, but she lost her 3 years ago, and then she also said to the girl, her name was Haru. A woman came and said that her hair color was the same as her. But other than that, she looked exactly like her father. She replied and said that mother often used to say that. That's why she thought that her father was an ordinary person like her. Those persons in front of her was Lord Alphonse and Lady Camilla. Lady Camilla was the sorceress who recently arrived. She was favored by the feudal lost son Lord Alphonse. At least that was the rumor she heard, even though he approaches mother so much. Lord Alphonse sure was a womanizer. They both were far passing from there, and they saw Haru, and then Lord Alphonse came and asked her how old was she. And if she needs something, she replied and said that she was 14. Lord replied and said that she was the beautiful Phrygia's daughter. He thought she would look like her when she became an adult, but it was big disappointment. She apologized and thought that he was hoping that she would become a beautiful woman. Lord Alphonse said that he will return to work, and Lady Camilla agreed. And then she saw her ring on Lady Camilla's hand and asked that why does she have this ring. Lady Camilla shouted on her and said that how dare her to touch her. She replied and said that that was something she dropped. That ring was a memory of her mother. It was something her father gave her, and she requested her to return it. She has been looking for it everywhere, and she again requested it to return it to her. Lady Camilla asked her if she was saying that she stole this, and it was an unbelievable thing to say. She replied and said that it was not like that. She just wants her to return that ring, and then Lord came and said that he didn't think that she was lying. But they also don't think that that ring was hers, and then he asked her to look it closely. That ring and set with a dragon stone. It was a precious gemstone that can only be found in Draenaz. To get it, she has to go to Draenaz. It was not something that she can easily get her hand on. Haru was surprised to listen about the dragon stone, and she thought that, why did her father have such a precious gem? Camilla was a noble. It was not strange for her to have a dragon stone because she had the connections to obtain it. Looking objectively, the Lord said that he thought that the ring was Camilla's, and then Lady said that to think that she would lie about it being her mother's to try and steal it. And it was so impudent, and then Lady Camilla said to Lord Alphonse to go from there. Haru screamed and requested them to wait, but they did not stop. Then she thought about the ring. She thought that the ring Lady Camilla has, that was definitely her mother's memento, although Lady Camilla insisted that it was hers. She had that ring for a long time. There was no mistake about it. It was her mother's, and then she took a side and heard that why did she have to go and drop it. Anyway, she needed it returned quickly. If she talked to her properly, then even Lady Camilla will understand. She thought that, and then she again go to Lady Camilla, and she said that she was from yesterday and found it persistent. And then Haru said that she begs to her and requested her to return the ring to her. Lady Camilla replied and said that she has already told her that that was hers, calling for a little girl. Haru replied and said that to look at her eyes that the exact same color as the ring stone. Lady replied and said that for what if she was saying that was the evidence that this ring was hers. Haru replied and said but that was her mother's memento and requested her to give it back. Lady pushed her and said that ring was hers. She received it from her father that year on her birthday. Haru replied and said that it was a lie, as that ring was a little tarnished, and there were scratches on it. If she looked closely, it was too old to be something she received that year, and then she stood up and told her to return it, as it was her mother's. Lady replied and said what was that about intimidating presents? Haru replied and said then it was great. And she asked what should she do, bending on her knees. And she asked how do she make Lady Camilla return the ring? And it was so troublesome. Then there came a man, and then she thought if he was a knight, but she'd never seen him before, and then he said that was dirt on her face. Haru screamed what he was doing, and thought if he was a pervert as to suddenly go and touch someone. Who in the world is the person? And then she thought about the person who said to her to take Red with her. She thought who was that person? And he seemed like a knight, but she'd never seen him around there, and if he could be looking for Red anyway, she thought she should finish quickly that day and go to Red. Then she goes to Red, and he came to her and made a sound like squeak, and then she said to him that he was still here, and that was great, and she asked him if he was all right, and if no one other than her has come here since he was acting like this. It looks like no one has come. And that was great, but like she thought, that can't last. It was not like she can hide Red forever. Red was gotten that attached to her because he can't depend on anyone else, and he has no friends to play with. It was because he has no friends close to his heart other than her, but she have decided that she will return Red to his old home, and then she said to Red that if she sent him alone, she will worry. So she will go with him to Drania's. Yes, she has some savings. So if it was just them, they will be able to do it. If they stay in a human country, it was not safe for Red. He can't hide forever, and if he's found, he might be killed. Considering Red's growth, that was the limit. As at his current size, she can carry him, but he was a little heavy though. All right, it was decided that she said to hurry up and depart as soon as possible. And that's what she would like. But she can't leave until Lady Camilla returns the ring to her. It was her mother's precious ring, and then Red behaved friendly. And then she asked what was wrong, and then he was saying to look as they were there. And then she looked back, and many people were there, along with the lady and the lord. And then Lady Camilla said to Lord that look, it was exactly like she said, although it was still young, there was no mistake about it. It was a dragon. She was so surprised to see Lady Camilla and Lord Alphonse to think she would be found by these people. And then she held Red tightly and said that he can't go. Lady Camilla said that girl intends to use the dragon to attack them, and the ring sparkles. And then she said that she wants to steal it from her, as she would be able to live a leisurely life from selling that highly priced ring. And then Lady said to Lord Alphonse and requested him to give her permission at that rate. The dragon will kill all of them. And then she asked to give her permission to dispose of them both, and then Haru screamed that boy was Lady Camilla saying such things. Although he was a dragon, Red was still a baby. There was no way they would need so many people to defeat him. And then Lord said that he will permit it. He doesn't know how she was able to get her hands on dragon, to think she would go that far to obtain the ring. Haru was surprised and thought why has it come to that? Anyway, she has to clear up the misunderstanding, and then Lady Camilla came close to her, and then she thought it was that Lady Camilla was not misunderstanding things. She deliberately framed her. She wants to get rid of her so she can keep the highly priced ring and have the leisurely like herself, and then she said to Haru to prepare herself. Haru replied and requested her to wait, and she would never use Red, and she will never use the dragon to take her ring back, and then Lord also said that her excuses were disgraceful. Not only she was different from her mother, but her heart was also corrupt, and then she told him to wait. Then Lady Camilla used her stick and asked her to be quiet, even though she tried the dragon to kill them, to think she would beg for her life now and ask that if she doesn't know any shame. Then Haru said that it was wrong, and then she saw something, and she only said B, and she told her that it was behind Lady Camilla. They thought that if it was a magical beast, and why was it in a place like that, and it was dangerous, and then the magical beast attacked Lady Camilla. And then she requested Lord Alphonse to save her, and Lord said that why was there a magical beast in the forest? And he has never seen one that big. Lady Camilla again requested if anyone was there. Haru thought that at that rate, Lady Camilla will do anything. And she thought what should she do? And then Lady told her to listen to her and requested her to save her, and she will give her back the ring, and she will apologize for taking it. She will even apologize for trying to frame her, and then Haru thought what an unbelievable woman she was. Then Lady Camilla requested her to don't abandon her, and said to the girl that she promised to return the ring. The girl tries and said to be quiet, and then she again requested to save her and to don't abandon her. The girl replied and said that she will help her and ask her to shut up as her shouts were only agitating the magical beast, and she will definitely save her, so she asked her to hold on for a bit longer. Although she said that she will definitely save her, the truth was that she had no idea what to do. The truth was that she was so scared that she can't move her legs, and that was keeping her from running away. The truth was that she wanted to scream and hide behind someone, but she can't just abandon her like that. It may be scary to try and help her, but if she abandoned her, she would be killing her to protect herself. She loved her ordinary self. She loved that part of herself that wants to meddle and help others when she sees a person in trouble, even if it was bothersome. But it was right that she will run away right now. She will definitely come to hit herself, and then she saw a rock and then picked it out that it was absurd. She knew already, but she can't do anything else because she can't use magic or a sword. It was a stone though, from what little she have learned about magical beasts. If she hit it in the eyes with this, then she might be able to make it back off for a little while, even if it was scary. She have to do it. She can do it if she was at its eyes. And then that night said that why she was intending to do with the pebble like that against an opponent like a magical beast. From the rose garden, it was the suspicious man from that time, and she thought that why he was here. The magical beast was there, and she thought that its demeanor has changed, and if he was scared, and then the man said to the girl that if he should call her kind or reckless. However, that part of her assembles his majesty as well, and then she thought what he said just now, it was too far, so she could not really see. But she saw that if he really killed, and then everyone saw and said that who was that person, and then lady thanked him for saving her. He replied and said that if she was getting her gratitude, then it was thanks truly, and then the lady apologized and returned her ring. She was happy to see her mother's precious ring, and then lady again thanked them to saving her, and then the girl asked the man who was he, and then the man goes down on his knees and requested her to forgive him for his late greeting. He was a Gore of Imperial Dragon Knight Army. His name was Kuronaji Road. He also said that he'd come from the Draenus Empire, and he'd come to pick her up, and he called her my lady. She was so amazed after hearing this, and she said that she didn't really understand what he was saying. Knight replied and said that it can't be helped if she was confused. However, she was the only one in that world that has the right of succession of the throne of the Draenus Empire. She was so confused at what was that person saying, and what does he mean by emperor? When Lord came and said that if Haru was the successor of the empire, and said to him that what absurdity was he as that girl walks at his house, and she was just a maidservant, then the knight asked him to be quiet, and then Lord replied and said that he came from the empire, so he was a draconian. Haru thought that if he was a draconian, now that she thinks about it, she'd read about it in a book. Draconians are said to be a battle race extremely skilled at fighting, be it their speed, reflexes, strength, or senses. Every ability necessary to fight was far superior to a human's. They were few in number, but every draconian was very powerful. It was said that if they were trained, a draconian child can defeat a skilled human soldier. Outwardly, they look more or less the same as humans, except for being taller on average. They also build muscle easily and have a hard time accumulating fat, and she do believe it that this person was probably a draconian. However, the fact that she had the right of succession to the emperor's throne, she can't. It was too much all at once. Everything was starting to spin and red, and Lady Haru was there. It was the night right after she lost consciousness, and then a person came in front of her and asked her if she had come, and he apologized for surprising her. Then she thought it was the same person from yesterday. He said that there was still time until morning, since it seems like she was tired. He requested her to take a rest a little more. Then she asked him if he was not going to sleep, calling him Mr. Kuronaji. He replied and said that he didn't need the Mr. and requested her to just call him Kuronaji, and she agreed. And then she thought that somehow that person was a little bit like a dog, and then she asked again if he was not going to sleep. He replied and said that he already rested more than enough, and draconians don't need as much sleep as humans, so he was fine. If it was so, she sees that it was all right then. He requested her to continue to rest. She replied and said that it was fine, and somehow she was wide awake. She can see the rose garden, so that means that was the mansion's second-story guest room. Then she asked him that where was Lord Alphonse and Lady Camilla, and she asked about that room. He replied and said that there was no need to use their titles, and he was allowed to use that room after he talked with the feudal lord's son. She thought that she can't come down in this needlessly huge room though. She replied that she sees and thanked them. Then she asked about Raki if he was in the forest. Then he replied and said that if she mean him, then he was right there. Then she saw Raki. She was surprised that the collar was gone. He replied and said that he removed it, since it seems like a bother. Then she replied and said that, as he said, he removed it. Then how he can remove it? That could not be done without a key. He replied and said that even without the key, he still had his strength, and she was amazed to hear that. And she thought that draconians are able to break something like that with their bare hands. And then she thought that if she do really have that kind of blood following through her. Then she asked him if she was the half-draconian. He replied and said that that was right, as her father was a draconian. And the former emperor of Dranias, His Majesty Edmund Rishadrago, she replied there, so it was really like that, and at first she was confused. But now she thought that why she was just easily accepting it. If anything, she feels the relief of having a lifelong question answered. But former means that father is no longer the emperor. Then she thought that if he was healthy. He replied and said by former he means His Majesty. Edmund had already passed away, and then he asked if she knew about incident between Dranias and Lumum from a year ago. She replied and said that now that he mentioned it, she had heard about it. It was said that the king of Lumum had killed the emperor of Dranias, but she did not know any details as she thought it was unrelated to her. And then she asked if her father was already dead, and she also asked that boy was her father killed. He replied and said that the Dranias Empire has never interacted much with human countries. They are a proud people. Therefore, they look down upon humans whom they consider weak and ignored their existence. However, His Majesty Edmund said, even among humans, there are people worthy of honor, and they can learn much by interacting with them in order for Dranias to develop. He attempted to do so until recently. The people supported His Majesty's views, and Drania's isolationist ways were about to change. However, the first place they reached out to was the neighboring country of Lumum, and it had a conniving king. He planned to cast magic on His Majesty Edmund to try and take control of the emperor's every action. He proposed to His Majesty Edmund a meeting with just the two of them when they were alone. The king of Lumum took out his wand to unleash the magic, but it appears he hadn't learned advanced magic, and he lost control to the spell. It killed His Majesty Edmund. They noticed the sound and immediately rushed into the room, but it was already too late. His Majesty Edmund was lying dead in front of the pale king of Lumum. Then she asked if he don't forgive the king of Lumum. He replied and said that of course he don't when she asked that he even more can't forgive himself for not protecting the emperor. And the one he was the most mad at was himself. She further said that he should not blame himself that much. He replied and said that calling her Lady Haru that he could not protect His Majesty Edmund, however, he won't make that mistake again. And he swears that he will protect the Lady Haru's well-being, even at the cost of his own life. Haru replied and said that she have no intention of living such dangerous life. Rather, she has no intention of becoming emperor. And besides, she asked that, what did he mean that she was the only successor of the throne? And if didn't the further or his siblings have any other children? He replied and said that neither His Majesty, Edmund, nor her have any siblings. Dranias has no successor right now and needs her no matter what. She replied and said that there was no need to be so excited over lineage, and he should make a more skilled person emperor, rather than her. The emperor of Dranias was different from a human king. The Draconians wholeheartedly respect the imperial family. It can never be said that protecting them is the reason for their existence. The imperial family was the commercial of the nation's heart since His Majesty Edmund passed away. However, the people can't overcome their sorrow. After losing the cornerstone, that was the emperor. Their hearts are scattered. She replied and said that it was impossible. If the emperor was such a precious person, then it was even more impossible for her. And besides, she asked that, what would they think of such an ordinary emperor? And she was not strong or anything, even though she have inherited the blood of Draconians, as she was just plain and pipsqueak. And then he laughs. She said that he just laughed and even he thinks so. He replied and said that she was wrong, as it was just that she was saying things that His Majesty Edmund also said, and he thought it was amusing. She was amazed about listening same things, and then he replied and said that yes, that was right. And they never thought of His Majesty as ordinary, but he spoke of himself as such. He would say things like he was different from them all. He was ordinary, or he was a pipsqueak and weak, and she was amazed that if it was so alike, she thought that she resembled her father. However, since it was the job of a common Draconian to fight, it was natural for the imperial family to be shorter and weaker in comparison. Lady Haru was to be protected. And then she replied and said that that makes sense, and because she was ordinary even though she was half Draconian. In other words, she doesn't have amazing strength, reflexes, or fighting ability. She was a little disappointed. Then she asked Kuronagi that if he want her to become the emperor. He replied and said that, of course, as there was no one qualified other than Lady Haru. And then she asked that how about others, as how people besides him think of her. He replied and said that other people don't yet know of her existence, because everyone thinks that His Majesty admits never had any children, although he said that he would come to pick her up. The truth was, he too didn't know she existed. He was searching for her mother, Lady Freyja. He came to Jazeera because it was her birthplace. He followed words of Lady Freyja to this mansion, but she had already passed away. However, he was able to find her instead. He knew she was His Majesty Edmund's child the moment he saw her golden green eyes. Then she asked that mother also used to say that, and if she really resembles him that much, he replied and said that she was a carbon copy. Of course, being a girl, Lady Haru was far more adorable. Then she asked that, but if that was the case, they still don't know how the Draconians will react once they learned about her. He replied and said that he thought everyone will be happy, because they all thought the imperial family who bound them together was gone. Then she thought that she was also half human. Many Draconians hate humans because the former emperor was killed by them. She asked to him, and she don't think those people will acknowledge her as the emperor. He replied and said that it was true that there might be opposition in the beginning. However, once the people truly learn about Lady Haru, everyone will acknowledge her, and there was no doubt that the emperor's blood was flowing through her since he can feel it so strongly. The others will definitely notice as well. She asked if it was so, and she still don't think every single person will acknowledge her among those who don't. Some people might be after her life. He replied and said that no, he doesn't think so, and then he said that it was time for her to rest. Then she asked that what was that, and if he thinks of something, and then he replied and asked her to do not change the subject. If it was going to be dangerous, that's all the more reason why she doesn't want to be emperor, and then he said that anyway, it was time for her to rest, and she agreed. And she was all prepared, and she thought she packed everything. She was not forgetting anything. According to the story, Kuronagi told her that morning, it seems like that ring was something that has been passed down through the imperial family for generations. Once the emperor had decided on their spouse, they give them this ring as a marriage proposal. If that person accepts that ring from the emperor, they become their spouse, and then if a child is born between those two, the ring was passed down to that child. The ring was set with was the same color as her eyes. It seems like it was a special color that was only inherited by people in the imperial family. Among humans, this gem is called the Dragonstone, but because it was the same color as the emperor's eyes among Draconians, it was called the Emperor's Stone, and then he came and asked to Lady Haru that what was with that luggage. She was planning to leave, and then he asked that have she decided to become the emperor. She replied and said that it was not at all, although she too intends on going to Drania's. It was only so she can return Red to his birthplace. It was become hard to be in that mansion, so she thought it was a good opportunity. Then he asked if that was so. Then she asked if it was fine, as she don't intend on becoming the emperor. He knows. Then he replied and said that, well, if that was her wish, then it can't be helped. He thought about their conversation yesterday, and it was true that there will be people who oppose her becoming emperor. There might even be people that would try to get rid of her. Since he knows it was dangerous, there was no way he can ask her Lady Haru to become the emperor in spite of the risks, and then she replied and said that she see that. She guessed that was where they part, and then he asked that why it was so. She replied and said that why he is asking as she was not going to be the next emperor. He have no reason to accompany her. He replied and said that she was his master, regardless of if she became emperor. If she intends to return Red to Drania's, then he will go with her, and he will always be by her side. And then she was surprised and said that when exactly did she become Kuranagi's master? Then he bent down on his knees and said that he was his knight and hers alone, calling her my lady. And then she replied and said that she gets it already and asked Red to go. Two people were talking that Kuronagi still has not returned. There was a lady and a man. The lady said that it seems he has gone in search of Lady Freyja. It was most likely to let her know of His Majesty Edmund's passing. The man replied and said that she left Drania's. It has nothing to do with her. There was no reason to specifically go and inform her right on time. A report regarding Kuronagi's movement has arrived as there was a parrot called Yamato was there with the letter. He said that finally, even though he has told him to report regularly, it can't be held since Kuronagi was the opponent. It can't be easy to shadow him. And then she read the letter, and then he asked that His Majesty Edmund and Freyja's child, If she said, and if the people find out about this, the empire will be thrown into chaos again. Once they discover her mixed blood with the emperor's, those that refuse to acknowledge it may ignite a civil war. For the sake of his late Majesty Edmund, he can't allow the country to fall to ruin. They must never allow that child to enter Dranias. As a last report, they may be forced to kill her, and then he said that if Dranias crumbles, then she will lose brute force to make it whole again. And then he said that to make Orga and Saul head towards him. If it was those two, then they won't falter from Puronaji. Lady replied and said that she understood. Then it was Haru in middle of a jungle, and it looks like it will rain. No way she didn't bring any rain gear with her, including today. It has been 6 days since they started traveling towards Dranias. Today they were in a wood called the Forest of Peace. There were hardly any monsters there, hence how it received its moniker of peace. Once they exit that forest, they will arrive at today's destination, Tuxeca. Tuxeca was a prosperous city with a large population. Tonight they will be lodging there. And then he replied and said that once they reach Tuxeca, let's buy rain gear, and it will be bad if their body gets cold because of the rain, and she also agreed. And then he said and requested her to forgive his rudeness for sleeping in the same room as Lady Haru. She replied and said that he doesn't need to apologize every time. Besides, it was not like she was going to be emperor, so let's just regard each other as friends. And she thought in her mind that he was so serious. Rather, she would rather keep more worry that they were woman and man, rather than master and servant. Well, even if she said that, since Kuronaji looks to be about 25 or 26, he probably sees someone like her as a child rather than a woman, and then he called Lady Haru and wrapped into the blanket. And then asked her to listen that, even though there was a man in the same room, she was so lightly dressed. She doesn't even have a coat, especially in front of other men. It was forbidden to expose such a defenseless appearance, and she agreed. And then he asked that if she really understand, as long as he was by her side, he won't allow any man with ulterior motives near her. But if Lady Haru was not even aware of herself, then how it would be. And then she said that if it was like that, then she will never find a lover. Then he was amazed to hear that, and said that it was far too soon for Lady Haru to have something like a lover. Then she called Kuronaji, and then he listened, and then she asked that how did her father and mother meet, and he replied and said that it was something that happened practically right away after they had begun interacting with the humans. They invited a famous musical group from the human country to Dranias. Lady Frigga was among them. She was a harpist, and she was amazed as she didn't know that. He replied and said that that's how they meet for His Majesty Edmund. It was love at first sight, and then she thought that was understandable as since her mom was an incredibly beautiful woman. And then he said that at first Lady Frigga politely rebuffed his approach. She paid little heed to his status. However, before long, they fell in love, and Lady Frigga stayed behind in the castle of Dranias. There were some among the vassals who were opposed to their union. But due to His Majesty Edmund's resolution and Lady Frigga's personality, those dissenters diminished. His Majesty Edmund gave Lady Frigga the ring as a gift, and everyone thought their wedding was soon to follow. However, suddenly, one day, Lady Frigga bid her farewell to His Majesty Edmund. While holding on to the ring, she fled Dranias, and then Haru wondered that what happened. He replied and said that he didn't know. However, he can guess. Around that time, he was the guard in charge of Lady Frigga. He watched over the two of them closely. As expected, she must have been troubled by the difference in the race, in other words, and then she yawns as she was sleepy. Then he said that for today, let's go sightseeing around the city a little. If they head straight to Dranias, there won't be any more large cities in Jaziria like Tuxeca. Then she said that there is something she have noticed, but the people in that city are not very energetic, and he replied and said that it was well noticed as the women selling tarts over there has a rather dark expression as well. And then she said to wait and ask that, what was that nut tarts, as well as apple and cheese and even pumpkin. She was lost because there was so many choices which one she should buy, and then she found those things delicious. And the lady asked them if two of them were travelers, and she replied and said that years after these, they will be going to further west. The lady replied that how nice it was that she also wants to leave that city. And she asked why. She replied and said that she sees the forest over there. It was known as the Forest of Peace. But recently, that has changed. Now extremely terrifying things appear, and then Haru asked if things like big magical beast appears. She said that no monster is far more terrifying than magical beasts. And then she asked that if things like this exist, and what in the world exist, and then she replied and said that it is dragons. Lately, sightings of dragons have increased. They say there are 2 dragons, so massive, she has to crane their head to look at them in their entirety. She wonders why there are dragons in that forest. Up till now, dragons would almost never come to human countries on their own like that. If they are such big dragons and like Rakshi, they couldn't have been bought there by poachers. However, those dragons were good creatures. They haven't attacked any residents and all. The women said the problem was that look, speak of the devil. Those guys have come. And then some guy came and asked the lady that it was the money collection and asked to bring out that week's part. Haru was surprised hearing about the money collection and the week's part. And then the lady replied and said that if she sees every week, those guys go around collecting money from them like that. They say it is a fee for protection. In case a robber comes, they will protect them. But it was more like those guys are the robbers instead. And then she asked, who are they? And then she replied that they are magicians, and she thought that, so it is because they are able to use magic that they can act so self-important. They call those guys demons because they are robbers who can use magic. They are unexpectedly come to this city about a month ago and just settled down. After that, they begin to harass people for money so that they could have their own wild merry ranking. And then she asked how awful it was, and she can't get them to leave her somehow. The lady replied and said that at first, they rebelled as well. However, because they were able to use terrifying magic, they can't even lift a finger, much less a hand. Because this is a prosperous city, the feudal lords' knights were permanently stationed there. But the first thing the demons did was attack the barracks and easily defeat it. It looks like the demons are extremely talented magicians, and then Haru was staring at them, and then he said to Haru that to don't spare them like that, calling her brat. And then Kuronaji came in between and started to fight with that man, calling him the bastard, and asked him that what was the meaning of that. And then the man said that if he was a soldier or a mercenary, as he have confidence in his battle skills. However, it doesn't matter how much he trained his body in front of talented magicians like them. He was nothing, and the man also said that they absolutely hate guys like him, acting all confident, putting on airs. And then Haru started to shout as Kuronaji was, but Kuronaji stopped her. And then they were gone from there. And then the people there said, where did they go, and asked them to come out and trying to make a fool out of them. And then she thought that was scary. And they were shouting that to don't think that they can run away like that. Kuronaji said that it would be best if they leave that city as soon as possible if he fights with a large group of magicians. Lady Haru might be put in danger. If during the fight that citizens find out that he was actually draconian, then it would become even more troublesome. Then she asks if the people in the city be all right, and then he replied and said that he knows that she was a kind person. But the ones that should save that country was not them, and then she agreed. And it would be nice if the capital's knights would hurry up and capture those guys. They really can't get out of that town, and they thought that what should they do if those demon guys find them. Kuronaji thought that if they encounter them, he will carry Lady Haru and run away. They won't be able to follow, but the opponents are magicians, Haru replied. She said what if they do something like teleport, and he further said that if she wants to use teleportation magic, she has to draw a magic circle to his target location in advance. Since there was no circle, they can't use teleportation. Haru replied and said that if it was so magic can be rather troublesome, and then she saw someone, and Haru said that what was wrong is if it could be that those demon guys found them. Kuronaji replied and said that it was not the demons. It was someone far more troublesome. Haru said that what was that and who was that? Kuronaji replied and said that it was Saul and Orga. One guy from those 2 guys said to Kuronaji that it looks like it was true that he was babysitting now, a child between his majesty and a human, and they said to let's see if it was Frieja's, and if their child was that squirt, he asked. And then the guy came closer to Haru and said that if she does really resemble his majesty that much as he can't see very well, but that hair color was the same as Frieja's. In that case, he thought that it was just as the Secretary General said it would be better to let her into draining us. Kuronaji replied and said that in other words, they guys came there on the Secretary General's order, and then the guy replied and said that he doesn't seem very surprised by their experience. Then Kuronaji replied and said that it was because he knew Yamato has been shadowing him. There was a report from him to the Secretary General. Haru was shocked listening about their shadowing, and she thought, is Yamato was a human or a draconian, or is he close by as well? The fact that he has been watching from the shadows probably means he was not an ally that Yamato person as well as the Secretary General Orga and Saul too. Then she thought that they all disliked the fact that she was the successor of the throne, and then one guy from those said to them, if they are finished talking, Then he wants to hurry up and finish this, and he was Saul. Then Kuranaji replied and said that what kind of order did he accept from the Secretary General. Saul replied and said that to not let the child enter Dranias, or else chaos will ensue in the country. In other words, they have to stop him right there. He further said to prepare himself as he was going to fight him up. Haru came in between and asked him to wait, as it was not like she had an intention of becoming the Emperor of Dranias. She just wants to return Raki to his home. Then he asked about the red. Kuranaji replied and said that he was a baby dragon who had been taken by poachers. He was in the bag, so that was it. Haru said that anyway, that was her only goal. She has no intention of causing trouble for him or Dranias. That is why she was doing it. He replied and said that her goal doesn't really matter, because the Secretary General was vigilant about her very existence. And then he asked her to listen. Well, right now, Dranias without His Majesty was, she could say, in a situation where it was fractured. However, if it goes well with her at the helm, Dranias could be reached to its former glory. But if it goes wrong, then because of her existence, there is a danger of Dranias being split right in half. The Secretary General thinks that there is a greater possibility of the latter happening. They can't expect her, who was raised by humans, to be a unifying force like His Majesty was. Kuranaji replied and said that even though he knew nothing about Lady Haru, he had rather considerable conjectures. If the Secretary General is unable to unify Dranias himself, he will lose composure, so he is desperately trying to end Lady Haru's existence. Then Saul replied and said that after this he was going to tell on him. Kuranaji replied and said that to him to do what he wants, but the fact that he has no composure was true, and then he replied and said that once he come back, it was going to get trouble for him, and then Orga came in between and said that if he have finished talking now, and that was right, and asked him to, let's get started the fight. Kuranaji said to Lady Haru that to take Red with her and get away from there, as their goal is to fight him. If she managed to get away, it won't be dangerous for her. Haru replied and said that she was fine, and she was more worried about him, and to fight against two people that looked that strong. He replied and said that he was very happy to know that she was worried about him, but he requested her if she could believe in him instead and step away. Then she thought that even if she did stay close, it's not as if she would be much help in battle, and she said to Kuranaji that he definitely can't get killed. He replied and said that as her wish calling for my lady, and then she replied that he can't, and Red was with her, and then the battle begins. She was worried about the Kuranaji, and then Orga told Saul to think a little more before he attacked with his animal strength. And then he replied and said that he doesn't want to be told that he have to think before he attacked by him, even though he just lived on instincts. And then Orga replied and said that he will kill him, and he also said to just try. Haru thought that it looks like the battle was about to start without Kuranaji. The Secretary General's choice was wrong, and then Kuranaji came and said that they too can't win against him, and then Saul and Orga were very angry and said that what did he say. Then Haru asked Kuranaji if he will be all right. And then the battle begins, and Kuranaji heard something, and Saul said that so he has realized, and then he replied and said that so the two of them were not the only ones that came there as they saw someone, and he replied and said that they were the only ones that received the orders. But Analia insisted on coming and followed them. Haru thought if that was an Analia, and then she saw her and thought that if she was the another Draconian. Haru realized that Analia person was heading straight to her, and she shivers. Kuranaji warned the Lady Haru, but Saul stopped him and said his opponent was them. She called Kuranaji as she was in danger, and then Kuranaji said to Red to take Lady Haru and bring her to the forest, and he asked Red to hurry up. Haru was surprised to hear that Red brings himself from the bag and catches Lady Haru and try to take her to the forest. Haru said to Rakshi that he was that strong, but she said to wait as she saw that person again, and it was Analia, and she thought that, what should they do as she was there? And she said to Red to keep going as she can see the forest of peace, and asked Red to fly down. She made a sound of squeak. They both were in the ground and hiding themselves from the lady. But the lady found them, and the lady caught Red in her hand, and she was standing on the Haru, and she requested her to let her go. But Haru was seeing the hair color of the lady. It was exactly the same as that woman, as if she was an exact copy, and the lady replied and said that Haru was as expected of her daughter, and Haru asked the lady if she knows her mother. The lady replied and said that it was not about knowing she loathes her. Haru was surprised after listening to loathe, and then she asked why. Then Analia replied and said that women did something awful to His Majesty, Edmund, who she respects and loved, and she cannot forgive that in spite of having received a ring from His Majesty Edmund, her mother arbitrarily decided to depart immediately after that woman seduced His Majesty Edmund and stole a precious ring that has been handed down in the imperial family for the generations. Haru asked her to wait and said that she was misunderstanding it. She replied and said that she was not misunderstanding anything, and she further said that if she knows how depressed His Majesty Edmund was after she left, that women's betrayal was so shocking that he never fell in love with the second time, and she further said that if she continued to head to Drania's like that, then she will kill her right there, right now, as she will never let a child with that woman's blood flowing through her into Drania's. Haru replied and said that she was going to Drania's as she has to return red home, and her right now also wants to see the country her father grew up, and the lady replied and said that she really was an idiot. If she wants to die that much, then she will happily kill her. Haru replied and said that in that case, since it was her end, she asked to give her some time and requested to listen to what she will be saying. The lady replied and said that no matter what she says, she won't be swayed. Haru replied and said that the story she heard from her just now was completely different from what she heard from Kuronaji. Around that time, he was the guard in charge of Lady Freyja. He watched over the two of them closely. In other words, the difference in their lifespan, and she thought that if there was a difference in lifespan between humans and Draconians. She also told the lady that he said that if a human lives to become 80, then a Draconian lives double dead 106 a year. Being able to grow old together was something absolutely impossible. After she accepted his marriage proposal, she became all the more worried about her lifespan. She hated the thought of dying and leaving His Majesty Edmund all alone. She probably thought that His Majesty Edmund would have been happier if she had chosen a Draconian rather than a human like herself. His Majesty Edmund also thought that he was not worthy of Lady Freyja, and that's why, when she left, he just quietly accepted it, without having ever discussed with each other about their lifespans, because both were trying to consider the other. They therefore decided to separate. The reason Lady Freyja had taken the ring was likely because she didn't want to forget about His Majesty. On the other hand, His Majesty never spoke to Lady Freyja about returning it, probably because he himself also didn't want her to forget him, and thus her mother departed from Drania's, and her father too did not try to stop her and let her go. After having returned to a human country and discovering, she had a child with the person she loved, and Haru wondered how she felt. At least it didn't seem like she regretted giving birth to her, though she loved and cherished her who resembled the person she loved to the fullest as a mother. Lady Analia listened to her, but she said that she didn't believe her, and that was just Kuronagi's own assumption, and however she asked that what she said was nothing but her own assumption as well, and then Haru asked her to be quiet as her father was not the only one who was in sadness. Her mother was the same. This was not just an assumption. She further said that her mother always did it, thinking she could not see, but she knew that she cried by herself at night. She never had another lover, nor did she remarry, and the lady who were in Drania's know nothing of her mother's suffering. Lady thought that child, she can't fully grasp her personality if she was stupid, or if she was intelligent or timid, or she was brave. She can't gauge her next move. It was almost like her respected and beloved, and she said that it was a lie, and she asked that in that case, where is the ring? She probably already sold it off for money, and then they both saw the dragons, and they thought that why would rock dragons in place like this? After seeing the dragons, Haru said to Lady Analia that they have to run quickly, and then she asked Haru that why must she run away with her. But the dragons came closer and attacked the lady, and she thought that even though she should hurry and run away, she will stop trying to kill her by her own hand. Instead, she will leave it to the instincts of those wild triggers, and if she was killed clearly by them, then she thought that was all there was to her existence. And then Haru said that what did her mean? And if she was gone, and she thought that what an amazing intensity she has. She thought that it was all over, and she heard the voice as squeak, which was of Rakshi, and she said to Rakshi that it was dangerous, so asked him to hurry and come down. And then Rakshi came to her, and she asked if he was all right and if he was hurt. And she thought that they probably think that she smelled delicious, and they planned to eat her as they were around her. She realized that they were relaxing, and if it could, that she had a talent for taming dragons. Now that she thinks of it, the first time she met Rakshi, he approached her right away. She thought it was because he was all alone in the forest. That since he was separated from his parents, he had gotten attached to her, but joking aside, she really might have a talent for taming dragons, and then she moved her hand in one dragon and thought that if they would be happy if she does that, that is what she thought. There was something like that, as they were following her, and she said that they can't follow her as they were returning to the town because she was worried about Kuronaji, and they should stay there. and if they come to town, everyone would get scared, and she tried to lead them with a bye, but the dragon stopped her by holding her clothes with its mouth. She was begging them and requested to let her go. After she makes sure Kuroneji is safe, she will come back. Now they have finally returned, and she tried to find out that where was Kuroneji. And somehow there were a lot of people. Some people saw her and said to each other that where was the girl that was taken by the young dragon, and she still has not been found. However, it looked like they headed towards the forest. They should hurry and find her, or she will be killed. Haru thought that what should she do as it was gotten serious. Rechi was seen by the townspeople. She thought that what should she do? If they are found, he might be taken away. For now she has to hide somewhere. Then she saw a window and she saw that no one was there. They will hide there for just a while. There was a room with lots of books in that house. That book too, and that paper too, all that was related to magic. That means the owner of that house was a magician. The glasses on the table and the clothes showed that there were several people living there. That and all those showy and gilded fancy furniture, and there was a huge amount of magic books. This must be the hideout of those demon guys. They have to quickly run away. Even if they say that the draconians are strong with them, magicians as their opponents, they won't be a problem. The people talk that against intelligent guys like them, they are just wild beasts. But it was still better to be prepared and have as many magic stones as possible to increase their power. And then she saw that they came back. The people said to Haru that she was from earlier, and she was together with the black-haired guy. And they said to capture her, and then she said to Rakshi that they were running away. She can't move her body. Rechi was doing the sound of squeak and was pulling her, and then one guy said to her that it was her own fault that she'll stay stuck like that now in order to punish intruders. That house had plenty of traps. The magic circle she was standing on was one of them. The townspeople were causing a ruckus, but who would have thought that she was draconian? But it doesn't matter who the opponent is, they won't show any mercy as she has made fools out of them. Now they will use her as a decoy to lure out the black-haired guy, and they saw the Raki and said that it was a dreadful dragon, and how scary it was, and then they picked the Rachi and Haru screamed. And they said that if they keep him alive and in one piece, they can sell him for a hefty amount of money. They asked each other to bring them inside. They also said that if they take that child as a hostage, that black-haired draconian won't be able to touch them. If a fight erupts between excellent magicians like them and a single, simple-minded draconian, then he won't stand a chance of winning, and it looks like that it will be an easy win. And then the guy asked Haru that how old was she. After they use her as bait, it would be a waste to let them two to die together. Or if she dies like this, and he gets violent, then dies. He wonders which of them would be more pitiful. Haru thought that it was scary, and it was disgusting, and she remembered Kuroneji that if he will stop, if she cries, and if she resists and say she hates it. One person was saying to Haru to cry and resist more, as that way it will be more interesting, and then she thought that what an awful and inhumane guy he was. No matter what that stupid guy will do, it won't faze her. And the guy replied that he will let her scream, and he will remove the cloth in her mouth. Haru replied and asked him to come, as she won't be defiled by this, and then the guy said that what was with her eyes, even though she was just looking at him. There was an overwhelming pressure. It was as if he was wholly just an insect to her, and he asked her to stop it, and said that what was wrong with her, and he asked her to hide her eyes, and she asked why. He replied to just hurry up and do it, and then the guy said to let's go and carry her to the main street, as once that guys appear, they will kill him immediately. And then one lady asked her that what was wrong with her since earlier, and the another guy said that it was nothing and asked to just hurry up, and they said that, all right, they got it. That boy she was so angry about, and they said that they will just leave the baby dragon there and go. Then they reached the main street, and they said that that child was taken by a dragon, and the people asked that what was he planning to do to her, and their guy replied that they were going to exterminate draconians that are raging in the town by using her as bait to lure them out. All they have to do is to be quiet and prepare their reward money. And they asked Haru to shut up, as a mere nameless vigilant like her won't be able to do anything anyway. And they asked her to be quiet, and the people were talking with each other. That guy will really come, and another guy was saying that he will probably come, and Haru calmed herself down and thought that Kuroneji will definitely come quickly. And so he was coming, and then she saw Kuroneji and thought that if it could be that he goes angry, and then he came, and the people asked him that, why was he smiling about? Kuroneji replied and said that he was just thinking about how grateful he was that he have covered Lady Haru's eyes. With this he can cut off their heads without worry, And the guy replied and said that Draconians really do lack common sense, as if he forget that they have a hostage there, and if he don't want her to get hurt. Then they asked him to don't move, and Haru asked Kuronagi to run, and the guy said that, as expected, he was really tough when he previously used this spell against some other guys. Their arms were blown off like toys. And then Kuronagi replied and said that, then let's do this, and Demons replied that he was going to be their target if he move or dodge these attacks. He knew what will happen to her. Haru said to Kuronagi that he can't do as these guys tell him, and the demon said that now he wonders if the next one will at least draw blood, and then Kuronagi disappeared, and he thought that, where did he go, and he was very angry, and then Haru was in the arms of Kuronagi, and he killed that person. And Haru realized that it was Kuronagi's smell, and Kuronagi said to Haru that he apologized for creating bad memories for her, and she said that it was not Kuronagi's fault. She should have stayed hidden with the dragons in the forest. Those dragons would definitely have protected her against Analia and the demon guys, and then he asked to her that if those dragons loved her and followed her, it was because she had the blood of the Emperor flowing through her, although those wild dragons don't understand the fact that Lady Haru was the successor. They were still able to sniff out and know by instinct that they should follow her. The dragons who fly freely in the sky don't travel to other countries because the Emperor was not there. Draconians are not the only ones drawn to those who have the blood of the Emperor, and he thought Lady Haru was truly suited to be the Emperor, and then Saul appeared again and asked him to do not carry it away. And then Kuronagi said to Haru and requested her to do not move from there, because it will be over soon, and asked her to wait. And then he goes, but she wanted to see the battle. But if she moves around in that situation, she will only become a bother to Kuronagi, and then she heard something and realized that those screams were not Kuronagi's. They were the voices of those demon guys, and then the guy said to himself that, damn it, he can't cast a spell in time. There were only half of those guys left, and just a little more, and then Saul and Orga came and said that they found him. Haru heard those voices and thought that if it could be Orga. One man from the crowd said to everyone, run to a safe place. He thought that Black Harachi Draconian was routing the demons, but at that rate it looks like he'll be killed, and they realized that it was not a battle that they vigilants can help in. And then people saw that what was that, and they realized that that kid was the Draconians, and then that man said to Haru to come down as he was not from the demons, and he will remove the cloth on her, so he requested her to stay still. Then he tries to remove it and asked her to wait a minute as the blindfold was tightly bound, and then he saw a lady behind him and said that what an amazing beauty she was, and then the lady said to her that the fact that the dragons didn't attack her, it seems like there was no doubt as Her Majesty Edmund's blood was flowing through her, and she had made the dragons acknowledge her just as Kuronagi was, and she was an Elia. She further said that, however, she will never acknowledge her who looks exactly like that hateful Frisia. She will never acknowledge her, then she repeated that she won't. She said that since she has more or less inherited His Majesty Edmund's blood, she will stop trying to kill her, but she would better not come to Drania's. As for Kuronagi, she will take him back home, just as the Secretary General has ordered. He will probably refuse, but in that case, she will make it so that he can't move his body and carry him. Everyone was shocked to listen that, and then Haru was coming close to her, and Analia asked her to do not come there, and the man thought that, what was that just now, and if she was that from that child, and the lady left, and the man asked her to use his hands as well as she was laying down on the ground, and then he asked Haru if he let her go freely right now. Then she was going to go and save that black-haired Draconian, and that was too dangerous. And then he asked that what kind of relationship did she have with that black-haired Draconian. Haru replied and said that he was her attendant, probably. The man replied that he see. But if he was her attendant, then if it was not, that all the more reason not to go and save him. It is an attendant's duty to protect their masters. So she just stayed protected, and then Haru replied and said that that was not possible, because if the leaders don't protect their subjects, if they think that it was natural to be protected, then no matter who the leader is, they have lost the qualification to be one. The man replied that she was right, it was just as she says, and he asked her to stay still. He will remove that right away, and then another man said to that man calling him captain, that girl ran away as fast as possible the moment she was freed. She said some grandiose things, but in the end she got scared, and the man replied and said that no, she will definitely return. For the people of Dranias, the emperor was an unmatched existence. Analia, who was born among the upper nobility of Dranias, was raised as a queen candidate for the emperor. When she was 13, she entered the Dragon Knight army, Later her feelings towards Edmund became even stronger than that of a vassal to its master. However, because of Frigga's appearance, those feelings were quickly crushed. An extreme jealousy dominated Analia over the fact that Edmund had chosen Frigga. A fire burnt deep in her chest, and it was as if that feeling thoroughly burned her heart away. She was even verbally abusive towards Frigga when Edmund was not around. However, Frigga never talked back, and it became an even more wretched feeling, and then that feeling of jealousy turned into hatred after Frigga took that ring and left Drania's. She hates Frigga, who so easily parted with that affection, even though she was chosen by him. She hates Frigga, who hurt Edmund. After Frigga left Drania's, and during the 15 years until Edmund died, Analia matured as an official dragon knight. After having grown up becoming an adult woman, both her strength and beauty improved, and she also began possessing a feminine charm to her. Even so, Edmund never became conscious of Analia as a member of the opposite sex. So long as he never forgot about Frigga, Analia's jealousy continued on as well. Analia had become exhausted by that fact. However, even to that day, her jealousy and hatred still have not disappeared. Even though neither Frigga nor Edmund were in that world anymore, Analia came to Sol and Orga and asked if he did do that against Kuronaji, and he agreed, and then she replied that it was all right, and she will also go again. She said that those annoying guys have taken a liking on him, and her condolences were there. On top of that, right now, it looks like some strange human magicians have their eyes on him too. From a long time ago, she has known about Kuronaji well since their ages were close and their houses were connected. One more thing they had in common was that they were young, and they were both assigned to the Purple of the Imperial Dragon Knight Army. Purple was a group of a select few guards specialized in the personal protection of the Emperor. Sol and Orga also belonged to that elite force that the people of the country admire. It was not as if they were particularly close or anything, but until now they have been several times she has felt envious on him. Unlike her, who was jealous and unsightly when His Majesty Edmund chose Frigga, Kuronaji accepted her without difficulty. She was very envious over that. She wanted to have more beautiful and pure feelings towards His Majesty Edmund, just like Kuronaji, instead of having no choice but to continue on living while suffering with those unsightly feelings. The orders from the Secretary General who unified the Imperial Dragon Knight Army were bring Kuronaji back, and don't let that child into Drania's. That child left Kuronaji behind and ran away. She was Frigga's daughter after all, and fleeing was her specialty. It was not as if she thinks that she'll come back, and then they started to attack Kuronaji with a sword, and now they said it all right. It hits and it serves him right, and then some guys came, and then he asked that what was with those guys, and they said that now was their chance, and they continued to attack and shoot that guy down. Analia thought that if he was about to get killed by the likes of humans, then she will kill Kuronaji, and the people said to her that it was like, they will let her do that. People screamed and said that what was going on is there were dragons in the sky. They thought, that why were rock dragons in a place like that? Analia said, those were the rock dragons from the forest, as she thought it looks like that child didn't run away. And then a voice came for Kuronaji, and Kuronaji saw Lady Haru, and she was so shocked that there was a blood and he was hurt. Analia thought, as her daughter, she would be spitting image of that hateful Frigga. That's why she had not bothered to look at her face. But those golden green eyes that shine like jewels and the strong determination dwelling in them. If anything, she was the spitting image of His Majesty Edmund. It was supposed to have come to an end, but there was no doubt that that child has inherited the blood of the imperial family. Haru said to Kuronaji that they have to quickly treat him. Those injuries were not that significant, so there was no need for worry, and there were plenty serious bouts though. And then Lady Haru said to Sol and Orga that she understands that they want to play with Kuronaji, but they can't right now as he was hurt. They replied and said that it was not as if they wanted such a thing, and then she brings the ring and said to Analia, there is the ring as she said, besides, probably she already sold it off right. However, she never sold the ring. It was the ring right there no matter what happened. Her mother never let go of that ring. She wonders if that was proof enough that mother loved father, and she said to Analia to believe her as her mother really did wholeheartedly think of her father, because Frigga was the woman that His Majesty Edmund has chosen. Analia replied and said that she understands that the truth was that she understood that from the beginning, and the fact was that only she was ugly. She was the only one jealous and acting unsightly. Analia was shocked, listening about the ugly thing, and she replied that, but she was so beautiful to Analia, and Analia replied that it means in a way that she was the only one harboring ugly feelings, and Frigga never felt jealousy towards anyone. Haru replied and said that her mother had feelings of jealousy too, if she knows, because after all, she was just a normal human. Whenever her mother looked at that ring, she always had a sad expression. But if she sees when she think about it now, within that sadness, there were more complex feelings mixed in. Both mother and father decided to separate because they thought of the other's happiness. On this she can say she knew because she was always close by watching over her, but she was probably jealous of the new spouse that was able to look together with her father somewhere. Analia asked that if she was jealous, and that pure, innocent Frigga was, and she wondered if that was true, but if that was really the truth, then she was not the only one who had these ugly feelings of jealousy. If, for example, even when she was mutually in love, she has to live a life where she can't stay together with her loved one. And she thought that she was the poor Frigga. And then Haru asked Analia if she was all right, and she replied that she can definitely purely love that child, simply as a draconian who honestly and straightforwardly follows the emperor, and that was the inkling she had. And she called her the Lady Haru. Haru thought that she has a feeling that she just called her Lady Haru. She definitely misheard, she thought, and she asked that, and she said that she bought the dragons so that they could fly away. But she was glad that she was able to manage somehow. The three of them had stopped attacking Kuronaji. All that was left to do something about those demon guys. And then someone attacked a lady from the crowd, and she asked to save her. And then the demon guy said to everyone, "All right, and listen. Well, first off, the vigilant bastards from town. Those guys were going to restrain the Draconians, and to the Draconians he said that they guys were going to accept everything without any resistance whatsoever, even if one of them disobeys that order, that women and the brat in her stomach will lose their lives." And then a man came forward and requested them to stop it, and asked to save his wife and child, as it was the child they were finally blessed with. The demon replied and said that even if he tells them he doesn't care, he should say that to the vigilant bastards and the Draconians. And then he further asked that now, what was he going to do, and if he is going to obey or not, and then the man begs to the captain to do as he says, and requested him to save his wife, and then Haru thought that what should she do? And what should she do to save those two? And then Analia said, Lady Haru, and she thought that when she says Lady Haru, if she means her like she thought she didn't misheard earlier, and then Analia asked her that what was her wish calling her Lady Haru. She replied and said that her wish right now was that she wanted to protect the hostage while completely defeating those demon guys. She replied that, well, then it will be as her wish, and then she tried to attack them. Haru screamed that she can't even with Kuronagi's speed, he won't be able to make it. At that rate, that woman was going to be stabbed, and then she saw that the knife that the demon guy had was gone, and she thought that if it could be that Analia took it with her whip. And then there was the fighting going on. And finally, they did it. And the people were very happy and said that he did it as Kuronagi also attacked the demons. And they said that they Draconians were amazing, and the demons had been defeated, and they were free now. Haru realized that that was great, and Analia said to Haru that everything was exactly as she wants, calling her small master. And then Kuronagi asked to Lady Haru if he can deliver the final blow. Haru refused and said that to don't kill him and let's hand him over to the vigilance. Since the townspeople had such horrible things done to them by the demons, and he understood, and Lady Haru said to Kuronagi that more importantly, it would be better if he doesn't move anymore, and she asked him to stay there, as she will go and call a doctor. Kuronagi replied and said that there was no need for a doctor, because these wounds are nothing for Draconians. She was shocked and asked if he was really all right. And she thought that, what if he dies? And then he asked if she was worried about him, and then she thought that somehow it seems like he was really fine, and then she said to Kuronagi that he was too close, and she thought that really what was that, and that changed on the smile of Analia. On the contrary, when she's too friendly with her, it was scary, and then she saw the dragons, and she found it amazing, and Rakshi was also there, and he made a sound of squeak again and again. And she apologized to the Rakshi as it was not like she forgot about him, and then Analia said to Rakshi to know his place. And she thought that it looks like it was necessary to train that dragon, and Haru replied and said that Rakshi was like her friend, or rather her brother. So that's why it was a little hard to be strict. Besides, ever since she met Rakshi, because she was constantly thinking that she had to protect that child, the time she had cried because of her mother's passing have lessened. Analia replied and said that it would have been better if they had found her much sooner, And then Haru asked Analia that since earlier what was going on, as she was suddenly using formal language and calling her Lady Haru, as she thought that she hated her. Analia replied and said that she apologized for having an impolite attitude. However, it was not as she hated Lady Haru. The one she hated was Frigga. However, that hate she held towards Frigga was all gone now, and there was no way she can hit her. The daughter of her beloved Majesty Edmund, who has inherited the blood of the imperial family because she was the one who stands at the top for them Draconians. And she was shocked about listening something like standing on the top. Kuronaji said that the feelings that Lady Haru has of losing Lady Frigga was similar to their feelings of having lost His Majesty Edmund. And the only one able to make up for that feeling of loss was no other than Lady Haru. Haru thought that, even though she can't even get used to even Kuronaji alone serving her, to think that a beauty like Analia wants to attend her on top of that. And she said that if it was not there, a more worthy person than Analia, and they guys can serve and they decide on the master that they want to serve ourselves, and she apologized. And then Kuronaji said to Analia that until now, Lady Haru has been raised as an ordinary human the whole time. If they suddenly say that she was their master, it is understandable for her to be bewildered, and they have to make her self-aware little by little. Analia replied and said that he was right. It seems fun being able to raise the next emperor with their own hands. Haru replied and said that she was not going to become the emperor. Analia replied that she will acknowledge that. However, there is no one other than Lady Haru who can become the emperor of Dranias, and Sol came and said that that was right and just gave up since His Majesty died. Everyone in Dranias thinks that the emperor's bloodline has come to an end. But in order to unify the country, a new emperor has risen up, and Haru thought that, so what she have to do right now, the one being recommended as the new emperor, was the Secretary General. He is the chief executive of military affairs. And then the Lady Haru asked that then, if the person was not fine. He replied and said that he thought that as well, that the Secretary General was the most suitable. But as expected, it was different. That person was strong and smart and has a sense of responsibility. But as expected, it was different. Orga came and said that that's what he think when he see her. Although the Secretary General was their superior, he was not their master, and he won't serve some emperor who does not have the blood of the emperor flowing through them. And Sol said to Haru, well, to do not worry about it, since no one thinks that you will be a perfect emperor from the beginning. And then Kuronaji asked Sol to don't say things like her to Lady Haru and address her as Lady Haru. And he replied and said that it was not as if she has officially become the emperor yet, so asked him to don't tell him to talk formally, as he won't do that. Haru wonders if she can also use magic. Yes, it doesn't seem like something easy to learn, but she have to learn it no matter what. In cases of emergency or for the sake of protecting herself, Rachi and Kuronaji. And then Analia came and asked her that what she was doing, and then Haru asked Analia if she can use magic. She replied and said that she was not knowledgeable about magic, or rather there was practically no one among training who can use magic. Then Haru said that now that she mentioned it, Kuronaji did said something like that, so she has no choice but to be self-taught. Haru was reading the magic books, and she read the art of permeation and the art of suspension. That she was caught in at the demon's hideout. If it was that magic, then it wouldn't be injure other people. The enemy would not be able to move, and in that time she can restrain them. If it was that, then even she may be able to use it. And she will take that to Book of Arts, and that encyclopedia and the complete works of magic as well. While she was at it, she will also take a wand. She wonders if they are hidden somewhere. Haru saw, and then Sol came and hold her hand, and she asked him to pause, and she saw that those were wands. And she thanked all for those, and then Kuronaji came and said to him that he must not drag Lady Haru, and Lady Haru replied that she will take that one, and then Orga asked her if she was really going to take that plain-colored one, because the black jewels resemble Kuronaji's eyes. And then she replied and said that that was fine for her. Tonight's party was a great celebration. They were able to repel the demon guys, and now they were drinking, and there was happiness all around. Analia wanted everyone to know of Lady Haru's charms, but at the same time, she thinks that the only one who need to know them was her. Kuronaji thought that he never had such selfish desire to monopolize with His Majesty Edmund, thinking that the Draconian guys won again. And if they don't have anyone that can measure up to them and win in drinking, and then he said to them, if they guys were already done, as he was not losing, and Orga said that he still hasn't drunk enough, and then the people will drink and said that he will be next, and just come at him then. And then Kuronaji realized now that he thinks about it. Those dragons were obediently sleeping. The spilled foods were getting on Lady Haru's cloths, and then someone asked him, calling him lad, if he was not going to drink. Kuronaji replied and said that he was not, and if he needs something from him, and the man replied that no, he just thought he should express his gratitude for the savior of that town, as they all knew that something had to be done, or nothing would change, but even so, they can't do anything, and how pathetic of them. Kuronaji replied that it was not as if they came to the town with the purpose of defeating the demon guys. On the contrary, they caused a lot of trouble instead, so there was no need for their gratitude. And then the man asked him that if he do have a lover, and he refused, and then he offered him that why don't he become his son-in-law, as his youngest daughter was still unmarried. Kuronaji replied and said that that was very kind, but he will have to decline to want a draconian as his son-in-law. He has strange taste, he thought, and the man said that if it was not the fine for a draconian and a human to marry, as he have heard that the country of dragons was exclusive, but it was not there as an example of that happening in the past. And then Haru came and said that there was an example as her mother and the father were like that, and the man asked if it was really so. Then that means that it was not an impossible thing for a draconian and a human to become lovers, and there was silence all around. They were having the food, and it was the cheese tart and the pumpkin one and nuts tart too, and they asked for one at each place. Kuronaji thought that the tart she ate when they first came to town. And Lady Haru seems happy, and then the man asked Kuronaji that to say, if he was that kid's attendant and he have a good master, as he says that kid was really desperate to save him from those demon guys and the draconian beauty over there. She said that since she was his master, then she has to protect him who was her attendant. Because of that, she returned a complaint by the dragons, and then Kuronaji thought that Lady Haru did something like that. So it was not for the sake of defeating the demons, but rather for the sake of protecting him. Dragon Knight, it is absurd to be protected by Lady Haru. But even though he should feel ashamed of his own worthlessness, the fact that Lady Haru acknowledged herself as her master, the fact that Lady Haru accepted his existence, makes him tremendously happy.